Good evening. I'm Jack Hemmingway, and welcome to a special one-hour edition of Incredible Idaho. As we start the new year, we're going to take a look back over the best of the last year. We've taken you from the Canadian border all the way to the far reaches of the Owyhee Desert. And we've captured a lot of magnificent scenery and wildlife along the way. And if we've learned one lesson, it's that Idaho is indeed an incredible state. Our first story tonight, A Spring Celebration, is a video essay, a blend of music, of pictures, with very, very little narrative. The pictures really carry the story. These wonderful images are the work of Bill Crum, our director and photographer, and needless to say, this is really one of his favorite stories. Water. It nurtures life. If one element could define this season of beginnings, it would have to be water. Beneath its sheltering cover, steelhead build their nests. Their long journey from the ocean is over. The rivers of Idaho have called the steelhead back to the place of their birth. Here, the cycle renews itself. The female prepares her nest, fanning the gravel with her tail. Nearby, the male plays court. A moment of time in a dance that has gone on for centuries. Each spring, the waters of Mud Lake nourish thousands of migrating snow geese. The wetland attracts two sandhill cranes, pausing on their way to nesting areas further east. Spring comes a bit more slowly to Idaho's high country. Every winter, a deadly drama plays out along the river in Island Park. The trumpeter swans depend on the open waters of the Henry's Fork for food. This was a generous winter. The Henry's Fork sustained the flock. The gentle warmth of spring has come, and the swans escaped disaster for another year. Bighorns greet the spring ever cautiously, ready to bolt where very few can follow. It's a sure sign of spring when Fish and Game biologist Mike Schlegel finds himself in a helicopter counting elk. Perhaps more traditional than the overhead buzz of a helicopter is the quiet spring flight of nature's own aerials. Spring is the nesting season. As evening closes on Lake Pend Oreille, this nesting Canada goose comes one day closer to hatching her brood. It seems appropriate our first show was made up of beginnings. When we return, we'll look at another beginning, the first day in this world of two little bighorn lambs. Last spring, we introduced you to one of Idaho's most dramatic species, the Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. But a drastic number of bighorn lambs were dying of disease along the Salmon River. It was time for a bold experiment. Let's take you back to the beginning, to a time when a Native American tribe called the Sheep Eaters shared the land with their prey, the Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. For centuries, predator and prey kept a wary balance. But all that changed with the arrival of the white settlers and the Sheep Eater War of 1879. Today, the rocky terrain above the Salmon River is still home to the bighorn sheep, but the sheep eaters have vanished from their ancestral refuge. Big Creek drainage shelters the primitive pictographs that tell the sheep eater story, and shelters as well their traditional prey, still roaming the rugged canyons. There's something wondrously majestic about these animals. We marvel at their remarkable agility on the steep rocky slopes. We're moved by their inherent dignity as they pause to survey their world. But here on the Salmon, that world is in question. Last June, 10 lambs were born to radio-collared sheep in the Big Creek drainage. By July, all 10 were dead. Wildlife veterinarian Dave Hunter wants to know why.
We don't have any pre-drawn conclusions. The first thing we need to do is take a look, follow these lambs, get all the information we can from them. So that's why we take them out of the wild.
These bighorn sheep are at a research facility near Caldwell. They're all pregnant ewes that were captured this spring from the backcountry. They should be lambing within weeks. It's difficult to closely monitor wildlife, especially bighorns, in their natural habitat. The plan to bring the sheep here seemed the best solution. This will give Dave Hunter the opportunity to examine the lambs from the day they're born and hopefully find out why bighorn lambs aren't surviving.
In the wilderness area back there, these population problems, or these disease problems, tend to be very, very closely tied to population densities, or if you will, the number of animals that that particular ecosystem can support.
Five years of drought may have contributed to the disease problems among bighorns. Biologists speculate that drought-stricken areas cannot support as many animals. The result is a population die-off. With this in mind, Idaho Fish and Game targeted two areas along the Middle Fork for the bighorn capture operation: Morgan Creek near Chalice and here at Big Creek.
Did I go up the hill to see him?
Yep. That was the one I was aiming for.
As the darting drug begins to take effect, Fish and Game biologists scramble up the steep slope.
First thing we look for is to see if she's shocky after we finally come upon her, after we dart her. And we look for the color to make sure that her capillary refill is good. You can see she's nice and pink. She's cut her lip as she fell down these rocks, but you can see the little wound there. That'll be just fine. We come down and we look for any obvious major wounds, which she doesn't have. She looks in good shape. We can blot the belly and we can feel something popping around in there. She's probably a little lamb. If we come down here, we can look at her mammary glands. We start seeing development of the mammary glands here. Okay, she's now Big Creek number 2, and she's an adult. She's, what do you think? At least 4.5.
Big Creek number 2 is loaded up into a sling for her trip off the mountain to base camp.
Okay, we're getting her.
We've got the sheep ready to go.
The drawbacks are always in the fact that you handle an animal, you take it out of its normal environment. We're putting an abnormal stress on these animals in this stage of pregnancy right now. So we take a chance on losing some lambs, and we might take a chance on losing ewes. And you have to draw the line and say, does the consequence of potentially losing an animal gain us anything from the knowledge we're going to get by trying to take them out? And in this case, I think it is. We're going to be able to follow these animals, follow this disease process through, look at the lambs, look at the ability of the lambs to fight their own battles.
From the base camp, sheep are loaded into a fixed-wing airplane for their trip out of the backcountry. A Fish and Game unit is standing by at the Caldwell Airport to transport them to their temporary home at the research facility. Over in Morgan Creek, the sheep are captured using a helicopter and a device called a net gun. This is less stressful for the animal because no drugging darts are necessary.
2.5, 3.5, she's 4.5 years old. Check her teeth.
Blood tests are taken, and the animals are marked with ear tags. Blindfolds and hobbles are carefully removed before loading the sheep into a trailer for the drive to the research facility.
We need to follow this thing through, and that's why, again, we pull these animals out of the wild into this artificial situation until the lambs are born, and then they will return to the wild.
We followed the story over a period of several weeks, and finally, the sheep appeared ready to drop their lambs. The ewes were rounded up for their trip to the veterinarian's maternity ward.
They have several diseases, any one of which could cause the demise of the young ones. But remember, if the mother had the disease, she should have produced antibody that will be passed on through to the youngster.
Hopefully, speculation such as this will be resolved as these sheep and their offspring are monitored in the weeks ahead.
Give me your hand. Give me your hand. You feel a hoof right here.
Nervous as an expectant father, wildlife veterinarian Dave Hunter monitors the ewes on the way to the operating table. The decision has been made to take the lambs by cesarean section.
We're being very aggressive about this because we've only got a population of 3. We can't afford to lose any of these.
Okay, here it comes. You got a clamp?
Oh, come on, little bugger. Is he taking a gas bath? They're born in fluid. You got to get that fluid out of there, so hold them upside down.
Oh, here we go. There it is.
Come on, baby. Let go of that stuff. You can't breathe that anymore.
If this lamb were born in the wild, the journey through the birth canal would have squeezed the fluids from his lungs.
That's the stuff you want out of there.
That's a good baby. Good baby.
So Dave, she's breathing,
She's on her own so far. She's a good full-term little lamb.
While the second bighorn is being prepared for surgery, the first milk is pumped from the new mother.
What's important about allowing the animal to have the first milk, the colostrum contains about 90% of the antibodies that the ewe has produced toward diseases in her lifetime. And that gives the lamb protection until that lamb reaches about 6 or 8 weeks of age.
All right. Is that just like Mom?
Another healthy lamb is pulled from the womb of his mother. This marks the first time lambs have been taken successfully by cesarean section from wild sheep.
Isn't it a pretty little thing?
3 weeks later, the lambs are king of the hill and of everyone's heart at the research facility.
But right now, they're healthy as can be. We take blood tests now. It'll be every 2 weeks, and it'll be every week once we put them back with their mothers. And we're going to check for disease exposure, and we're going to check for the signs, early signs that something's going wrong.
The third sheep delivered her lamb naturally. The tests on the baby ewe indicate Pasteurella organisms already present, the culprit that triggers death for bighorns.
The little lamb is already geared up to have problems, but you can see from the way this little guys running around that she's not having any problems yet. So whatever kicks or trips this pastorella over to become more virulent or deadly, we can see that it's not in the little one yet. So
Now it's a waiting game. This is the critical time for these little lambs. At 3 to 8 weeks, they must begin producing their own antibodies, or they will succumb to the same diseases that killed last year's lambs in the backcountry. It's a waiting game as well for wildlife veterinarian Dave Hunter, but the quiet moments have their rewards.
something very soothing about coming up here about 10 o'clock at night for the last feeding, and it's kind of dark in this heat lamp. And you feed them, and that kind of suckling sound, you know, and then they'll come up and they'll snuggle up to you right afterwards. And it's almost like bonding with my daughters when they were young.
The lambs did break out with the disease and nearly died. Scientists at the research facility took the samples they needed and then nursed the lambs back to health. They're doing just fine. And their mothers? Well, they've been returned to the wild, right where they belong. Beautiful Lochsaw River cutthroat. Let's go. I won't even touch it. Occasionally, I get to enjoy some of the hunting and fishing that Idaho has to offer and share it with our viewers. Probably one of my favorite stories was one we did last July fishing on the Lochsaw. Presidents should go fishing at every opportunity, said President Herbert Hoover, for it is a discipline in the equality of man. For all men are equal before fish. I found that out recently when I went fishing with my friend Steve Pettit.
It's a place I've been fishing for 20 years. Ooh, there's a nice one. Whoa! You know, 10 years ago, hardly anybody would come in here, but the Lochsaw has really grown in popularity, so this place gets frequent visitation now. Ooh, nice deep fish. It's a classic cutthroat lie. It comes down across a big, long, 100-yard riffle into a deep pool, and cutthroat will sit right at that drop-off as the water plunges into the pool and feed. Big stonefly, Jack.
There's a big stonefly.
Big salmon fly, yeah.
Well, I'll put a stonefly on, a big one. This is not a giant one, but it's one that at least I'll be able to see, and presumably the fish can too. Ever since I was a kid, there's something magic about an animal that lives in a whole nother world. And when you fish, and something comes out of that and takes your fly on the top, it's really exciting.
Well, I like it because I don't have to catch fish to have fun.
The moving water has a sort of hypnotic effect. After a while, you forget entirely about fish. The fish is a total surprise.
All right, fish on!
Oh, this one is almost respectable. I think a lot of people have said various things like every hour spent fishing is an hour which is not subtracted from the balance of your life. Certainly hours spent fishing add to your life, at least to the fullness of it. I want to release him without hurting him. Beautiful Lochsaw River cutthroat. Let's go. I won't even touch it.
It was almost impossible to find a cutthroat trout more than 12 inches long in the late 70s on the Lochsaw. And by putting the no-kill regulation in the upper drainage here, the fishery responded fantastically. And by 1981, 82, 83, you could catch 20-inch cutthroat here. Yeah, it's nice, real nice. You know, not a monster fish, but respectable. Pretty fish. Cutthroat. See the cutthroat?
Most places that have rivers flowing through them have a beauty. when you're in a stream and you see the stream bank vegetation and the things happening in the stream, it's really something. A lot of people go through life and never know this sort of enjoyment, the enjoyment of a pristine environment, of feeling the flow of a river around your legs, and occasionally getting a fish on.
Woo! Woo! 20 inches. Monster cutthroat.
Bill Crum, the photographer and director of our show, is of course drawn to the visuals of a story like the spring piece we showed earlier. But the next story is, I think, a favorite of our producer, Sue Nass. The combination of a rare animal steeped in folklore with a troubled history is a writer's dream. The animal is the wolf. Cry wolf. Wolf at the door. Wolf in sheep's clothing. Throughout history, wolf has implied evil. But what's beyond the folklore? What do we really know about the wolf?
This is a sound seldom heard in Idaho. The last known wolf pack was killed near the Middle Fork of the Salmon River sometime between 1928 and 1936. Now there is only silence. For thousands of years, the wolf roamed the mountains and valleys of Idaho. Elk, deer, and vast herds of buffalo shared the land and provided a prey base. Then, in the late 1800s, white settlers descended on the west, and with them came domestic livestock. Soon there was no room for both buffalo and cattle. By 1890, the buffalo was gone from Idaho. The turn of the century saw the demand for meat and hides all but eliminate the elk population in central Idaho. As wildlife faded away, the wolf began substituting beef for buffalo, and the war was on. Strychnine poisoning and bounties on wolves at the turn of the century devastated the wolf population. Between 1894 and 1900, 22,000 wolves were bountied in Montana alone. In Idaho, few were left by the 1930s. The wolf had been virtually eliminated by a more powerful predator, man. Today, the wolf is listed as an endangered species in most of the continental United States. But even now, myths and hearsay about this species have a powerful influence on the human imagination. Research studies conducted in northern Minnesota, where a viable wolf population remains, have separated some facts from fiction. The proximity of wolves in farmland prompted this study on depredation by Steve Fritz of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Well, as I recall, the figure is somewhere around 0.3% on an annual basis suffer depredations.
Farmers in Minnesota are compensated by the state for verified livestock losses, and offending wolves are trapped and removed.
In some cases, you see management practices that probably predispose farmers to having problems. One of the practices that we identified is disposing of livestock carcasses, animals that die over the winter, by just dragging them a short distance from farmyards, and we think that this attracts wolves. Still, most wolves live near livestock without causing problems.
Across the Idaho border near Missoula, hopes were high that 6 orphaned wolf pups could stay away from the cattle in 9 Mile Valley.
Yeah, I think it's a wait and see. I think most people, as long as they leave the cattle alone, there's not any big problem.
Rancher Ralph Thisted had a special relationship with the pups. When it was established that both parents had been killed, Ralph agreed that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service could leave roadkill deer in his front yard for the pups until they could make it on their own. Early in the morning, Ralph would grab his video camera and wait for the pups to make their appearance.
As far as having them here, I don't know. I still don't know for sure. But you couldn't let 6 little orphan pups go hungry.
It was a fun learning experience for Ralph and a big help to researcher Mike Jimenez of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
I just kind of call Mike and tell him what happened that day, I guess, most of the time. Oh, how many, and when they came out, and I think he asked me to watch for, if one limped or had after the trapping.
Last fall, the wolves were trapped to radio collar them. This way, Mike could track their movements as they grew more independent.
What we're trying to do is just kind of keep tabs on where they are. We keep tabs on the numbers, what they're eating, and we're trying to see that, that they're not coming back into the area where they're cattle, and if they are, we watch them real close.
Late this spring, the pups did depredate, killing a steer on a cattle ranch. In compliance with the Endangered Species Act, they were caught and removed from the area. We've come a long way from the days of poisons and bounties. Here in Idaho, more than 600 wolf sightings have been reported since 1974. Researcher Rob Cords of the Payette National Forest is hoping to confirm reports of wolves along the South Fork of the Salmon River.
Well, here's our one of our camera sets. Basically what they do is they've got a little tripwire that goes out to the carcass, and when the predator comes and disturbs the carcass, it sets off the camera, and they take their own picture.
Another device is a motion-sensitive camera. It's an infrared camera that's triggered by the movement of a warm animal. It's important for biologists to secure solid evidence of the presence of wolves.
Don't want to pull something out, or...
Sightings by the public may not always be reliable.
People are commonly mistaking coyote tracks for wolf tracks. As you can see, there is a great deal of difference in the size.
If there are wolves here in Idaho, and the evidence points that way, will livestock depredation figures mirror those of Minnesota? Annually, less than 0.5% of farms suffer a loss to this predator.
It's a very, very tough question. There's so many variables in this. My gut feeling is that the depredation losses here will be somewhere in the same general range as they are in Canada and in Minnesota. But all we can do is wait and see, I guess.
For the past 200 years in the United States, mankind and his economics have dictated which wild animals are acceptable. Many suggest, in our haste, we may have unbalanced the grand design that made the ecosystem complete. Perhaps, with more maturity, society can overcome the myths and folklore woven around the wolf, and we can once again thrill to the sound of wild things in the wild places of Idaho.
When watching wildlife delivered into our living room via television, we don't always realize how difficult it can be to document natural animal behavior. Wildlife can be very elusive. One of our toughest assignments was doing a piece on the rare harlequin duck. Because of its need for undisturbed habitat, the harlequin duck can be very, very difficult to find in Idaho.
Each spring, the harlequin duck leaves its Pacific Ocean home for Idaho's lush panhandle forests. They come to find nesting shelter along the cold, clear mountain streams that tumble into Priest Lake.
They are really unusual, and that's what's one of the neat things about them, is they're so beautiful.
The name harlequin is taken from the 17th century Italian clowns, known for their vibrant costumes. Like the jester, the male of the species is patterned with brightly colored plumage. But even in this clown costume, he is still very difficult to find. Fish and Game research biologist Frances Cassier spends her spring and early summer searching for sign of this shy waterfowl.
It should be just a little short ways down the stream here. And when I saw them, they moved downstream a little ways, but they should still be here.
In 1986, the harlequin duck was classified as a sensitive species. This means there are concerns about population numbers. A study was funded by the U.S. Forest Service to study the pristine mountain streams that harlequins seek out.
There's very little historical information on harlequins, so we don't know if they've always been rare or if it's something recent, if it's something that's man-caused or if it's natural. So that's what we're trying to find out.
After hours of tromping through brush in the icy rain, a pair of harlequins is finally sighted. It's time to go to work. A device called a mist net is strung across the fast-moving water.
It's pretty hard to see it. It's real hard to see it. We just bought a smaller net. We've been using a 42-foot net, but for streams like this, you've got to be kind of creative to fit the stream size.
In theory, biologist Mark Uleman will gently herd the ducks downstream into the nearly invisible trap. But in the wildlife world, theories don't always play out. Somewhere along the way, the harlequins escape. And it's back on the trail again for Frances and Mark.
We want to find out movements of the ducks on the stream, and we're real interested in finding out nesting areas.
Another pair is spotted, and the biologists go back to work setting up the mist net once again.
They're the only duck that's adapted to living on these, to breeding on these fast water streams. They don't breed anywhere else. They don't breed on lakes or slow-moving rivers. They only use fast-moving mountain streams.
This time it pays off. When the ducks swim into view, Mark startles them into flight, right into the net. The biologists rescue their catch, a brightly colored male. The female eludes capture once again.
We're going to band him with a Fish and Wildlife Service leg band, and then we're going to take a couple of measurements and nasal mark him.
If this had been the female, a radio transmitter would also be attached, allowing researchers to discover more about their unusual nesting habits.
Some things we've been finding out about them are somewhat similar to other sea ducks. They have long-term pair bonds. That's over several years, even though they split up when the female starts incubating. So they have to find each other again back out on the coast.
The study has revealed that even though they migrate to these nesting streams, they may not breed, or they may be failing at it. It's one of the many mysteries still surrounding these beautiful birds. But that's just what intrigues researcher Frances Cassier.
One thing I enjoy about this work is that generally we tend to think that you need to go to South America or Africa to study species that aren't known very well, but yet here in Idaho we have a number of species, and one of them is harlequins, where very little is known about them. So it's pretty exciting just learning about their life history.
Last summer, the research team discovered 2 harlequin nests hidden along the riverbank. This marks the first time that scientists have been able to study harlequin nesting habits in North Idaho. Journals play an important part in the history of the West. If Lewis and Clark hadn't kept detailed journals, we would never have learned of their triumphs and hardships as they traveled through Idaho. That journey triggered a whole new wave of adventurers. We call them the mountain men. The trappers told tales of harsh winters, hostile natives, and encounters with the legendary grizzly bear. The stories growing taller and taller as they went from campfire to campfire. but a few kept detailed journals. One of these was Osborne Russell. We heard a sudden growl about 10 feet from us, which was instantly followed by a spring of the bear toward us, his enormous jaws extended and eyes flashing fire. Oh heavens, was ever anything so hideous? Osborne Russell's encounter with that grizzly bear took place about 6 miles west of Fort Hall. At that time, grizzly bears roamed the entire western United States.
Today in the lower 48 states, the grizzly bear is found only in small pockets of its original habitat. One of these 6 remaining ecosystems is the Selkirk Mountains of North Idaho, where hopes are high that the bear will make a comeback.
I think the outlook for recovery of the bear looks pretty good in this area, assuming we can get a couple of factors under control. The most important is probably the man-caused mortality, and the other is just maintaining a secure habitat through such things as road closure.
The grizzly bear was listed as threatened under the Federal Endangered Species Act in 1975. Here in the Selkirk Mountains, the biggest threat to the grizzly bear has proven to be poaching.
Out of, I think, 9 mortalities that we've documented up here on radio-marked bears, 6 and possibly 7 have been directly attributable to man-caused mortalities.
The biologists are cautious when approaching a trap.
No bear!
Scientists knew that poaching in the Selkirks was a problem, but radio collaring the grizzlies revealed the alarming magnitude of bears being illegally killed. Obviously, critical information in the recovery of the species. But the business of radio marking grizzly bears is fairly tricky. Tom Vecchioli and Mike Super have spent the month of August trapping grizzlies along the Canadian border.
We'll skirt around, try and get a better look. What you got, Captain Bly?
The honey-colored bears blend with the surrounding area and are
that's good.
difficult to spot.
It's not something to mess with. We're not trapping gentle Ben here. The problem really isn't the bear in the snare, it's the bear wandering around, accompanying the bear in the snare. If we have a cub caught, well, mom's probably going to be around. And
That's exactly what happened to the trapping crew the summer of '88. A yearling cub was trapped and mom wasn't happy. Today, the trap is empty.
yeah, we got beat. Here we go. That means the bear came in and got the bait and didn't get caught.
The bears are drawn into the trap by the scent of the bait. Fairly ripe fish donated by Dworshak Hatchery.
The principle here is that I put bait in the back of this cubby here and make it look like the easiest thing to do is to come in from here rather than over the top.
In the bear's path lies a buried snare that's triggered when the grizzly steps on a spring.
The problem is that after bears get caught in these things a while, they seem to learn. And
For less experienced bears, the traps do work. This bear has been trapped and tranquilized. Now, biologists will measure and take blood samples. Imagine the power behind these claws. Batteries die on radio collars after about 3 years. Some bears that were marked in the summer of '88 have been recaptured. In this case, the collars are changed and a continuing history can be gathered on the bear.
We do most of our radio tracking from the air, and we can get information such as home range sizes, habitat use, and survival estimates. In the case of females, reproductive output, litter size, litter survival, that sort of information.
Strong reproduction and low mortalities are the keys to recovering a healthy grizzly population. Closing some roads seems to help the mortality problem, since illegal killing is the leading cause of death in the Selkirk grizzly. This also benefits elk herds.
Some of the hunters have noticed an increase in herd quality following the road closures for grizzly bears.
The other side of the survival equation is reproduction. Radio collars provide information on the death of the grizzlies, but in the wild, it's more difficult to judge how many cubs are born and the number that survive, or what a female needs nutritionally to bring a pregnancy to full term. That's where Charlie Robbins comes in. His lab program involving captive grizzlies and black bears at Washington State University provides a unique opportunity to study these animals firsthand.
All of the bears that we get in have some type of sad story that goes along with them. If they're young cubs, mom has usually been killed in some way, and they can't live on their own, and so they need a home. And so from that standpoint, we're happy to be able to help them. So there's certainly bears available, and for our needs, we've fortunately been able to get some of those bears for research purposes.
Grizzly reproduction is the focus of one study. Scientists already know that females don't begin to breed until they're about 8 years old, and then only every 3 years. But even when they do breed, it doesn't mean they'll bring off a litter.
What we're trying to do is develop a technique that will determine the body fat content and the body protein content that females have to produce cubs available to them when they go into hibernation.
Charlie Robbins hopes to develop a technique that field biologists can use to take these measurements on wild bears at the trapping site. Once the nutritional needs of grizzlies are identified, land management agencies, such as the Forest Service, can use this knowledge to protect habitat and critical food sources. Perhaps this combination of laboratory data and field research will help bring the rare grizzly bear back from the edge of extinction.
In a way, the grizzly bear really symbolizes whether we are, as a human race, can tolerate other species that may be dominant to us. I think it also kind of identifies on what we feel is our place in the world today. Can we just do everything our way, and if a species gets in the way, then that's too bad? Or do we value something like the grizzly bear and will make at least some sacrifices to allow it to remain within the ecosystem?
Mountain man Osborne Russell's encounter with the grizzly bear is quite dramatic. But the other part of the story is that he deliberately provoked the bear. In reality, the grizzly bear is a shy creature, almost never attacking unless deliberately provoked or startled. During the course of the year, we've managed to collect a wide variety of Idaho images. At the end of each show, we've established a tradition of showing some of these in a video essay of scenery or wildlife. We continue that tradition tonight as we close our show with the best of 1991. And we hope to bring you more of our incredible state in 1992.